this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Have you ever had a moment in time where you're speaking to somebody? Maybe they've done something wrong to you, or they have, disappointed you in some way, and they will come back and they will say, well, it was not my intention to do that. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to harm you. Or in the case or cases of what we're going to be speaking about today, I didn't mean to kill you. That's what we're going to be talking about, the word intent, and how it led to the deaths of 3 men in Kansas City. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, we have previously covered this case, or I keep saying case, and I hate when I do that. I really do, because I feel as though I'm disrespecting by saying that, because each life has value, as I think you would agree with me.
100%.
These are three separate cases by law. But it happened. I think the reason I do that is it's an event that has to do with 3 fellows that were found frozen in the backyard of a home.
And they were 3 best friends. You know, the one thing we learned from this show is that these men were never seen without one another. They were always lumped together as a group, and they were became known worldwide as the Frozen Kansas City Chiefs fans. 3 guys found outdoor in the snow, like they'd been locked out of a house intentionally, dead, and their buddy inside the house is asleep for days on end, and actually answers the door in his bathroom or sleeping clothes with a wine glass in his hand. I mean, it sounds like something out of a really stupid comedy, you know?
Yeah, it does.
And yet it's not even a comedy of errors. As we dig into this, we did cover this once before because of the nature of the deaths. You've got 3 grown men who went over to watch the final regular season game of the Kansas City Chiefs that year. They're all big Kansas City Chiefs fans.
Yeah.
And gathering together to watch the games, a common occurrence amongst this group of men. But as you mentioned, we've got 3 men who are dead: Ricky Johnson, Clayton McGeeney, and David Harrington. And inside the house, their buddy, Jordan Willis. Now, Jordan Willis was often referred to us. What we were told is he's kind of a genius, mad scientist guy, and was known back in high school now, of making up drug combinations, kind of, what do you call them? Like a branded type of a thing. You know, he came up with different ways of combining drugs to give you a different high or whatever. Right. And he was known like that. I mean, I can't name anybody from my years in high school and college that was known to do something like that. Can you?
No, I can't. And certainly I would not have learned it in high school based upon who tried to teach me chemistry in high school. That I would not have had any shot at that. This guy was probably independent of any kind of education that he may have received, referring to his high school years, was a genius in this area, and had the ability to go on. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that he had, and it's a bit unclear, he had previously been in a PhD program for chemistry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and he was an educated guy. He worked on AIDS-related research, HIV research. He was, and well, he did not become an unintellectual guy based on what he's accused of doing, but he was a person who followed along with this mixing of drugs or coming up with a cocktail of some sort? I don't know. I mean, you know how oftentimes we try to, when you and I talk about crimes, we'll kind of talk about the individuals involved. I mean, try to figure out their personalities a little bit. And in this case, I can't. I'm looking at this guy, Jordan Willis, and I'm thinking, what kind of friend, in air quotes, is this that would do this?
Yeah. I'm having to think about this a little bit relative to Willis during that time period. That, let's go back to his high school years. Designer drugs had, by the time this guy would have been in high school, had been on the radar for a number of years. You know, Dave, I still remember the first designer drug case that I ever worked, and it was ecstasy that I had, and that would have been, I think, hang on, let me get my math right here. I think that would have been in 88 or 87. And it was a young woman who had been snorting coke, and to top everything off, she dropped some X. It was provided to her. And I remember distinctly, we made a big deal out of this case because the detectives that were working on the case, they had told us that this was involving a new drug, and it was and the DEA had been on this for a while, talking about designer drugs. And that whole term designer drug is so bizarre anyway. You know, when you think about it, you're thinking, I don't know, designer clothes. You're thinking, and I think a lot of that goes to originally the market that they were after at that point in time. This is something so cool, and that you're gonna have friends all around you that are going to want this because it makes them feel euphoric, and they can dance all night, and they can do all these things, and there's a little hypnotic to it, and back then, I remember we had to go through special testing in order to isolate that particular substance in her system. And it was a big deal back then. Now it's just, it's kind of expected. In these cases, let me get this straight. There's nothing designer about this at all. We're talking about a combination of cocaine and fentanyl. So you're looking at, with cocaine, which is a stimulant, it's also referred to as a euphoric, which is kind of a term you don't hear a lot of people say. And fentanyl, which is synthetic opium, that has been used for years and years, to deaden pain and all those sorts of things. You combine those two things, and it actually takes cocaine to another level, because what they're doing is, I would like to say they're cutting the drug. They're cutting cocaine with fentanyl, but I don't necessarily think that it's a matter of cutting it, because in the past I've had cases where people would cut cocaine with quinine, baby formula, all kinds of things they'll cut it with. But to add fentanyl to it seems a bit disingenuous to call it cutting, because you're creating a new.
Well, normally when you cut, you dilute. You're taking.
Yeah, you do. You're trying to extend the life of the drug. Yeah, and you want to get the most miles out of it that you possibly can. And when
fentanyl doesn't do that. It's not it's changing the actual high, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is, and it I think what it does from the user's perspective, that euphoria that comes along with that sudden burst of energy, that jolt that an individual would normally get from snorting a line of coke, you have fentanyl on board with it, and it's a completely different animal, because fentanyl kind of will knock you down. Okay, it's an opiate. All right. So it'll put you into kind of a dreamlike state. If anything, if it doesn't kill you, which many times, as we're finding nationwide and have found for years now that it does, you combine that with the actions of the cocaine, and you're really messing with fire at this point in time. And, again, it's like you were saying just a second ago, and again, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but with friends like this, who needs enemies, right, Dave?
Well, all right. Now, these three men were all found dead in snow. Now, I want to set the stage properly, but it wasn't like they had 2 feet of snow on top of them. They were out in the back patio, yard, and it had snowed on top of them, but it wasn't like 3 degrees. It wasn't one of those situations where they were pounding at the door, let us back in, and nobody heard their cries. That's not what happened. The actual ruling on their death was that it was cocaine and fentanyl toxicity, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So if that's what caused their deaths, the location where their bodies was found is almost a moot point.
Yeah, you're right. Because, you're looking for, if you have a hypothermic death, not hyper, but hypothermic death, the manifestations are going to be completely different. And I thought about that for a while, and actually with the combination of drugs on board, I wasn't discounting it, that this could have been hypothermic, and you see certain things with hypothermic deaths, such as the undressing factor, where you'll have individuals that are going into a state of hypothermia and they start to take their clothes off because
why do they do that?
No one really knows. I think that it's the impact neurologically on the individuals as far as their perception goes. And I've thought about this before because I have had hypothermic cases. I think we've talked about them here. And we've had a couple. Remember, I spent my entire career in the Deep South. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't get cold, obviously, but it ain't Minnesota, all right? So I've often thought, is it like a neurological response where suddenly cold becomes hot? It kind of flips the script at that point in time, and your perception is all you want to do is get cool. And boy, do they ever get cool, and the skin is exposed to these just austere conditions, in some of the coldest places anywhere. And I thought that, would that be the case with this drug combo that they had on board? Would it have been some kind of weird hypothermic death? But I think your diagnosis is correct here. It has nothing to do with hypothermia. And it is, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to dismiss the horror of these three fellows, out in the backyard of this house that are covered with snow. No one deserves to be treated that way or to have their life end on this note. But in this case, it certainly did. And boy, did it catch the attention of everybody. I remember when this case actually dropped, Dave, and I don't know how many months we are downrange. It was the previous football season, I know. And when I say previous, I meant like not 2024. It was like 2023, I think.
Actually, January 7th, 2024.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2024. And we're thinking about this from the perspective of they've waited a long time with this case to bring charges in this case. And now we just are getting them now.
But all along they said no foul play. And that has really bothered me because it's kind of like there's no such thing as a traffic accident because somebody did something to cause this. Yeah. It might have been accidental on your part or inadvertent, you couldn't avoid it. But in this case, how do you have three grown men outside covered in snow, dead, and one guy inside the house asleep, supposedly, and there not be foul play, accident or otherwise. Maybe I didn't mean to kill them, but my actions caused their death. That's all I could think. And that, to me, that defines foul play. They didn't just go out there and have a heart attack and the other guys tried to help, and had heart attacks themselves. It's not like they were taken up by aliens and, nothing weird happened other than 3 grown men went to their friend's house to watch a football game. And sometime after that football game, they died because they ingested drugs that were brought to the scene by others. Again, foul play?
Foul play is such a bizarre term. And if you've got authorities that are saying that that there is no suspected foul play, well, I think that when they're letting that information out to the masses and they're saying there is no foul play, what they're actually saying is that, okay, well, they haven't been hit over the head, or they haven't been shot, or they haven't been choked, or whatever the case might be. They haven't been, intentionally run over by some motor vehicle. And I won't get too ridiculous here, but you understand what I'm saying. And that's why, these comments and ultimately the charges, and we can get into this in just a few moments, but the word intention comes up for me. It does. And whether, the thing about it is whether you intend something to happen or not doesn't mean that you're excused from any kind of responsibility. And that's a big thing. But here's the thing that always amazes me with people that OD, because at the ME's office, I would have, and here's a variety of things. We would have, and I don't really understand what the cutoff is, and it's going to vary from medical examiner to medical examiner. We would actually have cases of cocaine and heroin overdose, and they would rule those as accidental deaths. And I'm thinking, so you're conflating an accidental death because, in ME world, we only have 5 choices of categories. It's not like the canon of law where you've got this vast, thing that you can charge. And we're not in the business of charging people. That's not what we do. But you've got limited selection. So you've got individuals that OD on coke or heroin, and they're going to rule that as an accidental death. And then you have somebody that is suffering from chronic alcoholism, or as they say at the ME, chronic ethanolism. And they rule that as a natural death. So you're thinking, well, are these organic diseases as opposed to something else? So if you're involved in a car accident, and there's that word again, accident, and you're just minding your own business and somebody, I don't know, let's don't involve anybody else. You have a blowout on your car, on your tire, and it jams you into a bridge abutment and you die right there. That's an accident. Okay. But yet if you snort coke and you die, that's going to be an accident as well. Or if you inject heroin, that's going to be an accident, because you would think that for many people, you would have an understanding of what the risk is. And I know a lot of people that deal with addiction and this sort of thing. Well, you don't understand. It's addictive behavior. They can't get past it. They don't have the ability to control themselves at that particular time, and they're not aware of the consequences. Well, I don't know. It's a hard thing to take the measure of, and I think a lot of people don't understand that dynamic, when it comes down to the decisions that we make in the medical legal world as to, how exactly we're going to rule on any particular case. I think my question is this: with the ME in Kansas City, are they going to rule this as homicide? or are they going to rule this as an accidental death? All three of these, and I don't necessarily have an answer to that question. And if somebody wanted to go back and take a look at this case, how much, how much validity is there in calling this an accidental death versus a homicide?
And I wonder if that's what will be brought up if it comes to trial. A lot of times negotiations take place based on evidence. Lawyers get together, prosecutors, and they come up with the best scenario they can for wealthy people. Anyway, in this case, there are 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of delivery of a controlled substance, and we'll get into exactly what that means. But involuntary manslaughter is what the charges are. But to kind of, if you're, we did this before when the story was first happening. We did a body bags episode and covered it, and I'll put a link in the description so you can go back to that if you want. But we've got a scenario where guys get together to watch football. And they're big Kansas City Chiefs fans. It's the last regular season of the year against the Chargers. And they get together and watch the game. It's like a 3:25 local time kickoff, right? And so they watch the game, have fun. They're the one thing that we have to add into this mix is that these are guys who have known one another for a long time. Every indication is that these are the kinds of men who have known each other for so long that they take up for one another. They're just great relationships, and they like to party. They're all in their late 30s, and partying includes alcohol and limited drug use. Okay. I am not downplaying it because it actually is the story here. What caused their deaths and how did it come about? They were not handcuffed and held down while drugs were injected into their systems. They all were partaking of cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol. Fentanyl is my question mark, really is for me personally, because I'm wondering at what level did they know? Was the fentanyl, they being police, as they investigate these things, did somebody have a bowl of fentanyl on the table and said, this is fentanyl, this is cocaine? I mean,
no.
Because usually we find that the fentanyl, as you mentioned earlier, it's mixed in to give something a bigger kick, a bigger high or something. And yet we all know how dangerous. Well, and take that back. We don't all know. A lot of us who have covered crime-related deaths know that fentanyl is a scourge. We actually have done an episode on fentanyl deaths and what fentanyl can do. We've talked about how such a small dose of fentanyl can, the end of a pin kind of thing, can cause death. So I cannot imagine men in their late 30s that have a clue about life would possibly be playing around with fentanyl. Now, we only have one of the guys alive who was actually partying together with the 3 other men. You got 4 guys all together. They're watching the game. 1 is alive, 3 are dead. The one who's alive is the mad scientist who creates these designer drugs for friends and what have you. So we're told. Now, when we get down to the nitty gritty here, Joe, why is he alive and the others are dead?
Well, I don't know. That might go back to this idea of hypothermia. And let me tell you why. Okay. If they had stepped outside collectively, and I don't know why I don't know why those 3 guys would have gone outside as a trio and the other fellows stay inside. Maybe he didn't like people smoking in his house. I have no idea. I don't know if we got 3 smokers here, maybe so, because some people, will do that. And as a result of being outside for whatever reason, maybe just catch a breath of fresh air. And
I don't love smoking in my house. If you came to my house and wanted to smoke, you would go out in the backyard.
Well, yeah. However, my wife will come to me and say, honey, don't you want one of your cigars I bought you? And I'll fire it up there in the sunroom, have one of my weekly cigars every now and then. She's great that way. But anyway, I don't know if that's the case, but something got them out of that house. I don't know what the motivation was. Maybe they were all They looked at each other, maybe for a flash second, said, "I don't feel well." It could happen that quickly. And so they excused themselves, went outside. And when they got out there, it was like they felt like sandbags, essentially, wherever they were standing. They collapsed, and it can happen that quickly. And back to an earlier point, Dave, I don't think, and it's a great word picture that you use, a bowl of fentanyl. I don't think that that's the case. These drugs showed up at this house, and they've already got fentanyl in them. Okay. They've already got fentanyl in this combination. It's there. And I don't think these guys were aware of it. I think, because I don't think any person that's out there would say, "Oh, gee whiz, yeah, let me snort a mixture of cocaine and fentanyl." I think that's a splendid idea. No, I think that they probably thought that they were each getting a bump of cocaine, and of course, waiting there, indwelling that white powdery substance was something that they didn't expect, something that actually led to their deaths. So, Dave, my understanding is that now, below these many months, we finally have two individuals that are, in fact, charged in the deaths of these three men, these Kansas City fans that are found covered in snow in the backyard of this residence. And keep in mind, and reflectively, I'm thinking about this, they had to be found by someone. And I love the fact that you reminded me of this guy showing up. You know, he comes through the door in his skivvies or whatever the hell he has on, holding a glass, holding a wine glass of all things. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. But we do have two that are charged now. Yeah, and what we have... Well, we have the story. Okay, let me tell you what the charges are. Just then we'll go back and fill in the blanks. Okay, we have Jordan Willis, 39 years old. He's inside the house. It's his house where everybody's watching the game. Jordan Willis and another man named Ivory Carson. Now, Ivory Carson I'm not going to say he is a drug dealer. I'm going to say, according to the law enforcement paperwork we have seen and the charges, he is alleged to have brought drugs for the guys, some drugs. And that's why he is charged as part of this whole crime thing as the supplier of some of the drugs, not all of the drugs. Jordan Willis also, again, charged with 2 counts of delivery of controlled substance. Both men charged with the same thing. So again, 3 men dead. Ricky Johnson, Clayton McGeeney, David Harrington, dead outside. Jordan Willis, he sleeps for a couple of days, and Ivory Carson is not there at all when the men are found dead. But Jordan Willis and Ivory Carson are charged with 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of delivery of a controlled substance. To go down this chain here, the timeline of events, just very quickly, Joe. January 7th, the group watches the Chiefs football game, and they consume alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine. January 9th, 2 days later, that's when police discover the bodies, only because one of the men is engaged and his fiancee can't get up with him. She knows he's going to Jordan's house to watch the game. She doesn't hear from him after the game. He doesn't come home, and she doesn't know where he is. Now, she's ringing his phone. She's checking social media. They're all reaching out to Jordan Willis because it was at his house. And when she shows up to try to find her fiancé, she realizes, hey, his vehicle is here, and so are the other guys. Their cars are all still here. She goes up, can't get Jordan Willis to answer his phone or the door. She starts looking around and actually accesses through the basement, a basement window. And as she gets in there and is able to see one of the men's body out on the back porch. And that's when she calls police. Police arrive. Again, it's later in the evening. It's not in the early part of the day. It's actually after dark, about 10 o'clock at night, when police show up. And that's when they find the 3 dead men on the back. And that's when Jordan Willis answers the door,
dressed for bed like he's been sleeping with a wine glass in his hand. A neighbor actually shot video showing him in handcuffs, actually, at some point during the course of this evening. Now, January 12th, forensic medical examiner confirmed the deaths were due to fentanyl and cocaine toxicity. Joe, they find the bodies on January 9th. 3 days later, they're confirming the deaths are due to fentanyl and cocaine. Is that fast or is that normal?
That's incredibly fast.
Thought so.
And I think the motivation behind this, Dave, is you've got 3 dead.
Right.
They don't know what they're dealing with at this point in time. They have no idea. So, yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, that's remarkably fast, Dave.
Okay. Well, January 23rd, lab analysis confirms the presence of cocaine and fentanyl in seized drug samples. They found baggies inside, and that's what they found in them, cocaine and fentanyl. July 10th. Now, go several months forward now. And this was the part about covering this story that for many of us was very difficult. We had a lot of information in the first couple of days and then nothing. I mean, just nothing. July 10th, DNA evidence matches Willis, identifying him as a major contributor. July 23rd, lab tests confirm one bag contained cocaine and another contained fentanyl.
Whoa. I got to tell you, I stand corrected here, because now this sheds an entirely different light on this, Dave. Because you know how I said, I made reference to, you had talked about the bowl of fentanyl.
Right.
And I know that, you were just, using that as an example.
Yes.
However, it really takes us back to this gentleman in his high school years, doesn't it?
It does. And the thing is,
you begin thinking about, well, was he trying to mix things together at this point in time and give them to his friends? They
haven't actually given us a full picture. That'll come later, because what I was thinking is that these are adult men who know drugs, know what they are. We all know fentanyl is deadly. And the fact that the police found these bags that were separate. They found the fentanyl and found the cocaine in separate bags. I don't know that the dead men here actually knew those drugs in those bags. We don't know. Was the mad scientist mixing these things together? Let's say he has those upstairs in a room and he mixes them together and brings down his new designer drug concoction. We don't know that yet. We just know that investigators did find cocaine in one bag, fentanyl in another. If they were mixed together, it was mixed together on site by one of the men. And we don't have to assume, but I'm going to say that Jordan Willis, the chemist, the scientist, would have been the guy mixing these drugs up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that he would probably be at the top of the list, given his, scientific background. If he's the one, kind of, I don't know, words of Bob Dylan, down in the basement mixing up the medicine.
Right.
I don't know. That certainly might be the case here. He would be the number one candidate if I was the investigator on this case, trying to unwind all of this information and put together this timeline.
Now, after police had the info on July 23rd, we got cocaine, we got fentanyl, and they already had fingerprints and everything else, okay? But day after that, on July 24th, investigators interview Ivory Carson. They bring him in, and you know how these police investigations go. Interviews go. You can watch them online on YouTube. I encourage you to watch them, because police come to you with just enough information to let you know they have info, but they don't give you all of it, because a lot of times they don't have all of it. They have just enough that they believe you're guilty of something, but they don't have enough. You got to fill in the blanks, and they'll get you to do that. They're brilliant at this. Ivory Carson admits that he did sell drugs, so cocaine by the gram, to Johnson, Willis, Harrington, and McGinney before January 1st, 2024. So before the football game, he had sold them, each one of these guys, cocaine by the gram. I don't know what it costs per gram. Guessing around $100. That's what it used to be. At any rate, each one of these guys, according to Carson, bought drugs from him, cocaine, separately. July 26th, forensic data extraction from Harrington's phone. How many times do we see this now?
Oh,
where,
boy. Yeah.
boy, investigators get that phone and they are pulling, even if you think you deleted them, you think you didn't save it, they have messages confirming Carson as their primary cocaine supplier. Make sure you understand cocaine supplier. At no point in time does it say.
I know. Does it say fentanyl supplier?
No,
Yeah, and
it does not say.
That's key here, I think. And if you've got, and isn't it interesting, that you would have this fellow saying that he had sold to all of these gentlemen
Right.
At some point in time. And if I guess it begs the question, where in fact did the fentanyl come from? What's the origin of it? And
Right.
how long had this individual or individuals, I don't really know how to frame this, I'm at a loss. How long had this fentanyl been there? Are there other instances where maybe something else had been mixed up, another batch had been mixed up? Because obviously there's a history here, Dave. And I really wonder if that's what the police are exploring, in this particular case.
Wow. That's a whole new day, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I think it is. Because, these guys had apparently partied together before.
Right.
And if they hadn't, I would find it odd that you would have 4 individuals that had reached out to this one individual and, Carson for cocaine, and that they, indulged individually. You would think that, we're going to hang out together and we're going to, imbibe, if you will.
Well, they're smoking a little marijuana, drinking some beer, having a little Coke. I mean, look, granted, a lot of people party like that in their college days and shortly after that. Usually by the time you're in your late 30s, that has changed. Not always. And I'm not dogging these guys out by any stretch of the imagination, okay? Bless their hearts. I agree with police when they said this goes to show you what happens when you decide you want to party with street drugs, because you don't know. We've talked a lot about fentanyl and how, because it is such a, it's just vicious. You just don't know how much you're going to get and how much it's going to cost you in the end. In this respect, we have 3 dead men and 1 live guy, and that's why there's charges. I mean, did he have fentanyl in his system? Did they take blood from him, from Jordan Willis? No. I don't know. We'll find out later.
I suspect that they didn't. I don't know. They may have compelled him to participate in a blood draw, for all I know.
How long would cocaine or fentanyl stay in your system?
Well, I think that honestly, I don't have an answer to that question, how long it would take to metabolize, to make it all the way through your system. I know that there would be some remnant there. However, I would find it odd that they would have compelled him to do a blood draw. They very well might have, or maybe urinalysis. I don't know what kind of authority that they would have. They would have to get a warrant for that in order to facilitate that. In a case like this, it's not like he's applying for a job here.
Right.
All right. They're doing a death investigation. So you got a whole new bevy of rules that apply to an instance like this. But this brings us back to the note that we started on. We got 3 dead guys. All right. Now, whether or not you intended that this afternoon and evening of partying would wind up in their deaths and them subsequently being found outside days later, it doesn't matter. Dead is dead. Now, the fact that they have been charged with involuntary, at least under the law in most places, would give us an indication that there was no intent. But we know this. There are families out there now that are absent 3 lives that can never be replaced. We're going to stay on this case and see where the road leads. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.